Lift up your gaze, be lifted up. Tell everyone how great the love come down from heaven's gates to kiss the earth with hope and grace. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, strong and mighty. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, strong and mighty. Lift up your hands, be lifted up. Let the redeemed declare the love. And we bow down at heaven's gates to kiss the feet of hope and grace. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, strong and mighty. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, strong and mighty. There is one God, He is holy. There is one Lord over everything. There is one King, He is Jesus, King of glory, strong and mighty. There is one God, He is holy. There is one Lord over everything. There is one King, He is Jesus, King of glory, strong and mighty. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, strong and mighty. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, strong and mighty. You are the King of glory. The Lord, strong and mighty. You are the King of glory. The Lord, strong and mighty. King of glory, King of glory, King of glory. I'm going to play a song for you guys. It's called My Hope, and this conference is about hope. It's half written. I wrote it. It's not done, but, well, it's kind of done. I'm not going to play you the part I don't like. But, yeah, so, I just thought it would be fitting. Wasn't really planning on doing it, but it's kind of easy to catch, so if you catch on, sing along. This is my hope. This is my confidence. Your promises are true. Wash all my fears. Wash all my doubts away. I put my trust in you. My hope is you alone. I put my hope in you alone. There's no other name that I can stand upon. My hope is you alone. And in the storm, I cannot sink beneath these waves. When my eyes are fixed on you. But if I fall and take my eyes off you, your hand is there to save me. I'm reaching for your mercy. My hope is you alone. I put my hope in you alone. There's no other name that I can stand upon. My hope is you alone. Hope is you alone. I put my hope in you alone. There's no other name that I can stand upon. My hope is you alone. Come, Lord Jesus, come. Come, Lord Jesus, come. Come, Lord Jesus, come. Come, Lord Jesus, come. Yes, Lord, that's our prayer. That you fill this place with your Spirit, Lord. Holy Spirit, come here, Lord. Fill this place, fill our hearts. Fill us with your power, Lord, with your strength. We give this time over to you now, Lord. We love you, we praise you, we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. How many of you have found at least one idea that you think is going to be helpful for you so far? That's encouraging. We are going to group up for this next session. So if you are in preschool, kindergarten, first or second, come right up here to this cluster. Upper elementary, junior high, senior high, and in the middle, right behind this front section, administrators. We've got some jobs for you today too. So I realize some of you may also teach. So it's up to you which circle you want to be in, administrator circle or whatever grade you teach or subjects you teach. But we've got younger elementary, upper elementary, junior high, senior high, administration in the middle, if any are joining us. Couple of customer service announcements. If you have not yet turned in a 3x5 card with a question for tomorrow, feel free to fill that out at any time. There's ones back there. If you think of a question, you will not offend me to jump up, grab a card, and write it while you're thinking of it, okay? Not a problem. Motion is not a problem for me. I still remember what happened in kindergarten. The first day of school, I was so excited. When you have older sisters, one 6 years older, one 4 years older, you've been waiting for school a long time. And I got to kindergarten, and the first thing we did was stand behind our desks and pray. And I rocked like this a lot when I was a little kid. And so they said, bow your heads to pray, and I bowed my head to pray. And the next thing I knew, God reached down from heaven and whapped my backside really hard. And I was like, whoa! I don't know what happened. Like, it was so startling. And it had to be God. Everybody else had their heads closed, eyes closed, heads bowed, that sort of thing. And then I realized over time, nope, she did it when we weren't praying too. It was my kindergarten teacher. She thought that motion was disrespectful to God. And the goal at that school was to learn to sit still, stand still, be still at all times. Now, I actually believe God designed us to move. That is what he wired us up for, okay? And that's how brain development happens. And often regulating, this for me was very regulating. It still is. You might see me do it while I'm here on stage. Questions that come. If you have questions about movement, brain development, we have just barely touched on so many things. But I hope I've got you curious enough to start looking for some audiobooks, looking for some resources. There's some free resources that I'll tell you about, and I'll show you a few of them tomorrow. But there is a website called Learning Lifeguard. Right now it's learninglifeguard.com. If you type in estherwilkison.com, it will get you there too. Most people don't know how to spell Esther Wilkison because, ironically enough, it is a spelling error of just a few generations past. Yes, I used to be either Wilkinson or Wilkerson, I forget. But someone wrote it wrong on a marriage license while they were coming across from west to east on covered wagons. And so for a while, there were Wilkisons, Wilkison, and that's me, okay? And then Esther has a silent H, which if you know the Bible, you're used to that. If you don't know the Bible, they're like, Esther, your name is Esther. I'm like, no, actually, that one's silent. So questions, if you have questions for me, but resources, you can go to learninglifeguard.com. I have some free resources, about 6 or 7 different articles, some of which expand on what we're going to do this hour. Also, in the back, right beneath the lifeguard chair, there is a computer. And if you go back there and type in the information on the little form, you will not only receive the highlight notes from these sessions, okay, some of the best quotes, some of the best ideas. I will send that to your email. But also, I'm just in the process of launching a learning lifeline, okay? So there's lifeguards, well, like when you're up on a high tower, you can throw a line out to someone, or if you're on a boat, there's throw lines, okay? And if you get a hold of that line, it can definitely help you and be pulled in to safety. So we're doing an email newsletter. It's starting out monthly. Hope to increase it to more than that as time goes on. But just a little burst of encouragement coming into your email. Won't swamp you with things. But even some of the questions that have come in already, I've thought, ooh, if I can't answer this tomorrow, I want to make sure we include that in the Learning Lifeline. So I would love for this to be a two-way ongoing conversation. On my website, there's a contact me place. You can click there. That will email to me. I don't mind handing out my email, but it may be changing. So that will end up in the Lifeline as well. So that's the best thing you can do is type your name and contact information into that little computer, hit submit, and then we will have you forever and always as BFF, okay? So, motivation. Oh, one last thing I should tell you. I mentioned Camp Sierra Secret. It's a book written for basically 4th and above. They had a hard time knowing at the publisher if they should put it in upper elementary or middle school. So that was their dilemma. They decided to not put pictures inside, so they made it a YA, but reading level, it works either way. The other thing I mentioned, the journals that are handwriting improvement journals, okay? If that's of interest to you, the smaller ones are $10, the larger ones are $15. The larger ones, there's one that's fine line and one that's larger line. So if you're interested, we're still fighting to make square work, so be patient with us, but we will try to make sure we can sell these to you. even if you have to mail us checks, which we hope that doesn't happen. Okay. Um, do you ever have kids that look like this? That oh so very motivated look? So the first thing you're going to discuss in groups today, think about now this is just thinking about you personally in all your years of sitting and listening to people talk and teach and preach and all that. What has been motivating for you throughout the years? What would you say not so much? Now I realize the same thing that like the opposite could unmotivate you. But I want you to discuss in your groups and kind of come up with a list that you would say just for you, actually not in your groups. Do partners on this, so bear with me as I adjust. Let's just do partners, you and one other person near you, or two if it's going to be an odd man out. Keep everybody unified. Discuss what has motivated you throughout the years and what is really a downer. Like when somebody did that to you, you were like, game over, we're done. Try to get work out of me, sweetheart, okay? So on your mark, get set, with the partner, go. Talk that through. The other person has a turn as well if you haven't switched. Back this way. I'm curious what you talked about, okay? So as you discussed with your partner, were there any things that as they said something you were like, oh yeah, me too, oh yeah, that, okay? So what were some of the things that you would say you had in common that motivated you? What are your thoughts? Say again? Deadlines. Those are those fascinating things we watch past. No, deadlines, knowing there's a cutoff time. That really clarifies expectations, okay? If we're not clear, if we're driving in the fog and we can't see, I hope you go slower. Not everybody drives slower in a fog, but you should. Okay, so yeah, so if it's not clear, so clarity and knowing that it's only this amount of time, that's motivating. What else? Aha moments. That definitely motivates us as teachers, okay? All right, for sure that does. What else? What has motivated you along life's journey? Having goals. Like, okay, I'm aiming for that. We're going to go for that. Competition. We beat you, okay? Others of you are like, you put it competition, I'm done. Like, we're done. I'm not playing, okay? I get it. Different things for different people. What else? Good examples, absolutely. Actually seeing the example of how to do it. Cheering them on. I think teachers would do well to wear the coach hat more often. And I had to tell my kids, they figured out pretty early on that they could spell better than I could, 5th and 6th graders. And in fact, they told me when I left college, Esther, please don't teach above 3rd grade. The kids will spell better than you. And God put me in 5th, 6th, and they spelled better than me. And if I were going to write something on the board or hand out a note to parents or something, I'd go over to the office. This is before spell check was as good as it is today and long before we had Siri. And then the people and the secretaries in the office would help me get everything spelled right. But you know what it's like when you're a teacher, and in comes a little kid with a note and from another teacher, and you're supposed to write a note back. So I'd be like, how do you spell money? They would burst out laughing, and I'd be like, no, for real, how do you spell money? And they would spell it for me, and I'd write it and send the little kid off, and then I'd be like, okay, time for a powwow. And we'd have these little family circle up times, and we'd talk, and I'd say, okay, now I needed your help with money, and I get why you laughed. You weren't really trying to laugh at me. You were laughing because it's really incongruous for a teacher who doesn't know how to spell. Like that just, it seems like a baby word, and you're a teacher and you don't know how to spell it. I was like, that's fine. In some ways, I'm like a coach in a wheelchair. I can't demonstrate every skill. Have you ever noticed that NBA coaches look very different than NBA players? Those coaches would be toast if they went out there on the field, but they know how to win the game, and they know how to coach. And often, if we would think more like, hey, guys, we as a class, we're going to learn how to do this thing, and I'm cheering you on. That mindset gets us a lot farther than I'm the sage on the stage, and I'm going to tell you how it's done, and you better do it the way I want. The guide on the side, the coach cheering you on, definitely a better, more motivating thing. What was it right before motivation of coach? Somebody said good example. Was that it? I've observed in a lot of classrooms. It's so fun. I love watching teachers teach. You get so many ideas. And I have seen many a teacher try to explain a writing assignment. You're going to do an essay, you're going to do a report, and it's going to be about 8 pages, maybe 9, maybe this, maybe, and you're going to include some pictures, and these are words going out in the air. And they're like, they didn't do what I told them to do. I told them. Words going out in the air don't give us a concrete. Remember what Jesus did? Look at the birds, look at the grass, look at the fields, it was concrete. You give them a good example. This is the kind of report. This is the one I wrote to show you. You can laugh at my writing if you want, but here's the one I wrote to show you. They have a concrete example. We all do better with that, whether it's something written, whether it's just watching somebody that we're like, I want to live like them. What else? What else motivates you or demotivates you? Yes? Real life examples. Wasn't Jesus the master of that? It's almost like he knew how to motivate people, Almost like if we read the Word of God, we might learn some great things as teachers on how to motivate people. Real life examples. What else? Any demotivating? Like, forget you. Huh? COVID. The ultimate downer. Yes. Okay, it's good that we can laugh about it. Okay. Better than that than cry. Yeah, it was very unmotivating because there's nothing quite like busting your tail to do something and then watching it all fall apart. It's really hard. It's very unmotivating. I like to encourage myself with the reality that in all labor there is profit. Even the books I've written that are still in a drawer. In all labor there is profit. Doesn't always feel like it. But remember, we're in a kingdom that's invisible. That should be a comfort, okay? So often when I'm beating myself and feeling down and discouraged and a failure, which was how I ended every single year. In my first 5 years of teaching, I always tell people I had about 20 years of experience those first 5 years because I was so involved in so many different things. And at the end of every year, I would just be like, oh, I'm a failure. This is lousy. I'd write poetry, okay? And the whole series was called On Failure, and every end of the year I'd write another poem on failure. I hadn't grown like I wanted to. My kids certainly weren't where they needed to be spiritually. They weren't where they needed to be academically. See, I'm the farmer who threw the seed in the field and then was like, oh, nothing came up. I'm a failure. Wait a while, okay? Let somebody water, let God give an increase, and something's going to come. But I didn't see it immediately. So I was like, it's all for nothing. Boy, did I think I was important back then. Cracks me up. Here's the thing. Is that really what my definition of success, is that what makes us successful? How far we get our kids academically? If you think you can control that, I pity you. Okay. We can do what we can to motivate them, but a lot of times we don't know. We just plant seeds. So how do we know when we're successful as teachers? I submit it all comes back to that word grow. And the only circle I control is the one that's right around me. And I don't even control that one. God has to do a work in my heart. But if I have grown in the Lord this year is a success because Jesus and me are plot. Now, I'm not saying sit in a corner, ignore your students because you're busy growing in the Lord, okay? You need to be responsible and teach them, yes. But one of the things that I've learned is I go where the Holy Spirit leads me, and I learn from whatever happens there. And so letting the Holy Spirit lead you into conversations that are awkward and uncomfortable sometimes, into all different things throughout the school year, and then grow from what happens. That's the beautiful thing. Our schools should be a culture of failure because that's where the learning happens. Have you ever watched a baby try to walk? On the diapers, boom, boom, boom. And what do? You got half a step! We're so excited by the least little bit of progress. But it looks like failure, and it looks like failure, and it looks like failure, and it looks like failure, until the day they start walking and it looks like success. Learning looks a lot like failure. And our kids don't understand that. And they don't understand that because they're programmed early on that a teacher says 2 + 4, and they're like, wait, 6. Okay, they wouldn't slow that. So 2 + 4, 6. They think that's what success is. I can spit out answers fast. And that's not what success is. Success is, do you even know what 2 means? Do you know what plus means? Do you know what 4 means? Can you assemble blocks that show this to me? We got to slow it down and get that foundation of understanding, or we can't build thinking on that. So we talked about this earlier, but this is where you're going to get in your groups. By the way, was there anything else on motivated, unmotivated that you're just dying to say? Because I'd love to hear it. Anything else? Yes. Oh. I am so thankful you brought that up. I've done a lot of air travel, and every now and then some parent is railing on a poor flight person that's telling them their flight's canceled or something, and they're like, and here's their little child just holding on to their leg, can't understand anything in the situation, and they're just sobbing because they know their person is upset. Often it's our tones. Our tones. Kids will say, you yelled at us, and you're like, I did not yell. But our tension level was so high. So learning how to have a calm voice, how to keep the smile in our voice, that's a practice. That's a practice. Any other things on motivated, unmotivated? Challenges. What do you mean by that? For me, I work the front desk. I'm glad you brought that up. Imagine if God put your school in a location where what you're teaching might actually solve a problem, either in your school or in your community. The school I was in, first year, fired the administrator at Christmas time. School almost folded. They were deep in the red, so even though we were one of the poorest Christian schools you can imagine, like as far as teacher salary, they cut our salaries mid-year. What a blessing. I started doing janitorial for this school on top of everything else because I couldn't make my apartment rent. And even though the school was in such dire straits, the kids still want to have ball games and events and stuff. And I was teaching 5th, 6th, but I was working with student council for high school and coaching the ball teams. And my kids were like, Miss Esther, one of them came in one day, he's like, my parents own a commercial popcorn popper and a commercial cotton candy maker. Could we make cotton candy and popcorn and sell it at the ball games to the big kids? I was like, on one condition. You have to pass a math test that shows me you know how to count back change. You've never seen more motivated kids to learn how to count back change because they wanted to sell to the big kids. And so once they passed that test, then they got a year of practice selling and counting back change to the big kids and adults that came to the ball games. Well, by the end of the school year, we were making such a significant impact on the fundraising. We had installed soda machines. We'd done all sorts of things that was helping keep the school afloat. Their skills that they were learning weren't something theoretical. There was something we were putting to use. So what is something you're learning that may have impact in the community around you? I tell you who's always fair game for something entertaining is a nursing home. What if your kids go in there and put on a Christmas play for the nursing home people? What if they learn how to communicate loudly for people who can't hear well at the nursing home? What if there's so many things. So there's two things I want us to discuss. First of all, in your groups, circle up, I want to discuss this idea of mastery versus exposure. Remember when we talked about that this morning? There's certain things in our grade level or in our content areas that we need to master, and certain things that are kind of more exposure. And I want you to talk to the other professionals around you. And they may not teach your exact same subject, but I want you to talk about what things do you feel like in your grade level or in your subject you really wish that there was mastery around. Like if they move on from your grade and they don't know this, what are the things that it's just like, oh, they need to know this? So I want you to talk about what's mastery and what's exposure. And for those of you that are administration, I want you to talk about what it looks like in your school if we're not teaching every fact equally, but we're mastering some and giving good exposure, not joke, but good exposure to other things. Okay, on your mark, get set, go. About 1 more minute on this topic. Okay, let's bring it on in. Woo, I love it. I'm just sitting here smiling. I can tell you're learning, your lips are moving. Okay, very cool. Very cool. Now, it's interesting because as I was just tuning in a little bit on different levels, I was seeing people like, as someone would say something, it was like, yes, that. Okay, yes, we need to master that. Yes. Now, I kept you kind of siloed with just younger elementary, but even among that, like preschool into kindergarten, kindergarten into first, first into second, isn't it interesting when you start saying, oh, actually, we're going to try to master this little piece and save this for your grade? I think sometimes we try to master everything in each grade. And obviously, if there isn't a foundation laid, we're going to have trouble building upon it, okay? When I was teaching 6th and 7th grade, all subjects like dying because combination class, and I had never taught before, and I was just, and I went to the middle school math teacher, and I was like, bottom line, tell me what they have to know before they reach you. And he said, could you please just send me kids who can add, subtract, multiply, and divide? I promise you I can take it from there if they actually know. I don't even care if they have memorized. Do they even know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide? Okay? When we're talking about motivation, this afternoon is what I call the content subjects. Bible is a content subject. I'm teaching them certain content. Math is a content subject. Science and history, everything that's not language arts is based, not that you don't have content in those subjects, you do. There's a lot of grammar content, things like that. But overall, those 4 subjects are what I call the content subjects. And it's interesting how those subjects now math is kind of its own little animal. I heard a lot of math discussion going on because if you don't have certain parts in place, it's very hard to build upon them. What happens so often in math is it's kind of like, picture in your mind, a coat closet or a closet in your home where no one hangs anything up. There's no hooks, there's no hangers, we just chuck stuff in. You know, if you chuck in 1 year's worth of clothes, shoes, belts, whatnot, okay, you've got a little bit of rubble. If somebody needs to go find something in there, they can still kind of dig in and find it. You know, might be a little wrinkled, but they can find it. But you start adding 3, 4, 5, 6 layers of stuff just getting thrown in, no hooks, no hangers, and all of a sudden things take a lot longer to find. And things get a lot harder, which really comes into play for all of you here in middle elementary who are trying to teach long division. Because heaven help, you know, they have to add, subtract, multiply, all the same problem. And they're like, And you're watching them, and you're like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, you cross that number and you bring it down. And you're like, you can't borrow backwards. And they're like, yeah, you cross that number, you bring it down. Yeah. Like they have zero comprehension. They learn the trick to get an answer. But when it comes to back in the day of multiplication, what does 2 times 3, what does the 2 mean? What does times mean? What does 3 mean? I can't tell you how many teachers I've asked, what does times mean? And they're like, I don't know. So let me just tell you. Sets of. 2 sets of 3. 3 little circles, 2 in each one. 2 sets of. That's what times means. But we haven't really taught the meaning. It's kind of like when I learned Spanish, because I did have a lot of years of Spanish before that D and an F. So I can go like comer, to eat. Or I walk into a Spanish-speaking context, and I'm like, hola, ¿cómo estás? And then they all come at me with words, and I'm like, no, kidding, poquito, nada. I don't know what to say here. Like, I'm out, okay? By the way, fun fact, just the irony of God. If you were to look at my passport, you see the most of? Mexico, Honduras, Panama. Amazing. Apparently, God can use me even though I don't know the language. He's used me a lot of times through an interpreter. Sometimes just talking very slowly with lots of motions to people who do know English, but not as well, not their first language. So God has a great sense of humor, and he is great at using us in contexts that we would never understand. Multiplication, division, some of the core things that you were like, I wish they could get that. And it's interesting, sometimes the harder we want kids to do something, the more we keep coming at it, but coming at it from the wrong level. Sometimes we need to take it all the way back to the shallow end. Remember when I dove in the deep end and almost drowned? That did not make me a better swimmer to spend more time in the deep end. I needed to be in the shallow end and learn what I needed there. And I tell you how many teachers that I've said, okay, here's some Unifix cubes. Show me the number 127. Where's the hundreds? How many hundreds is that? What is this? If you are not masterful with concrete objects in teaching math, we got a problem. We'll get to more of that later. But if you really want to master something, the pilots have the right idea. Okay, aren't you glad that a pilot is well trained? Do you know what they do to train pilots? They play. Not even kidding, they play, they pretend, they get in a little flight simulator and pretend they're flying a plane. We need to play in ways that actually simulate real life with the math facts we're teaching. That's going to be the most effective form of teaching. Okay, so as you were thinking through mastery versus exposure, I know we've got a lot of different levels going on, so we're not going to take a lot of time to share around that. But you know what made my heart happy? Is the kind of conversations that were happening are the kind that could really be game changers. And you know what? You can continue that conversation going right through supper tonight, okay? Keep talking about these core ideas of how can we move this forward. And sometime in a teacher's meeting, you may want to do this cross, like all the people teaching math talk about what we need math all the way up. All the people teaching Bible talk about what we're going to do all the way up. Science and history, to me, are the prime subjects for teaching your study skills. Kids need to know how to outline, how to get their arms around data. And we can go backwards off the textbooks because textbooks are already organized that way. So let me ask you this. What are some of your best techniques if you want someone to truly master something? Like, there are certain things, whether it's listing all the presidents or whatever it is that you've decided is your mastery piece. Do you have some techniques you use to get that done? And while you're thinking on that, what are some of your favorite, just exposure? Like, I just want you to get a rough idea of this. Okay, this time talk just to your partner, so everybody's talking. And those two ideas, what have you done that has helped a child master something? And what do you lean on if you're just like, we just need to cover this content so you are somewhat familiar with it? Go, talk amongst yourselves. Back up here. Let's try it. Okay. What will we hear, hear, hear? What will we see, see, see? What will we do, do, do? Right now. So if it really has to be mastered, get an annoying little tune. Okay. I tell you what, there's a book that's called Made to Stick. It's bright orange. It has duct tape across the top. It's written by two brothers, Dan Heath and Chip Heath. And one of them works at USC in education, training teachers. The other one works in advertising. Who does a better idea of getting ideas to stick in people's heads? Often advertisers. And it's interesting, it's a fascinating book where they talk about what makes for a sticky idea. And it's concrete, people can touch it, it's musical. We're going to get into exactly what makes that, but if you're going to master it, you're going to have to send information in through multiple doors. The song catches our ears, the motions catches our eyes and participation. That's what you need to do. Use all doors if it's going to be mastery. Now, sometimes when I'm just doing exposure, I'll have kids outline the chapter, showing them how to find the main points. Those are the bold caps and all caps and bold. Then there's some that are not all caps, but they are bold, and those are the subpoints. And a lot of times kids have never realized there's a structure you can pull out of the chapter. So I'd have my kids, upper elementary and middle school, not so much in preschool, okay, but I did have kids outline the chapter, find to the main sections, do that in partners. I just was reading a book the other day, fascinating new book that came out called The Soul of Desire, and he said the human brain can handle almost anything as long as it doesn't have to handle it alone. So put you in partners and you can work a lot better. So have them outline the chapter together, then have them write the test. And tell them you're going to take their test that they wrote with their partner, and you make up the test. And you can also, look at the book yourself to come up with some questions. But it's really exciting when you're taking a test and you find the question you wrote. Now, if there's 8 inventors in this chapter and they all came up with doing a matching with the 8 inventors and what they invented, then a whole lot of the groups are going to think you used their question. But I tell you what, you start teaching kids how to write a test and they start thinking like a teacher. And when they know their questions are going to be used in the test, that's powerful. And I'm not giving them a grade on that. I'm saying I need you to write this so you have a test tomorrow. So give me your questions, and I'm going to take it home and type it up and make it a test. And yes, I add my own. I make sure we've covered all the bases. But often over the course of the year, if they're writing tests every week in their history book, even if they don't take I always made them put the answer in where it was found. It's quite a good reviews tool, okay? Just one of many, but that's just a little idea. Now, here's the thing. I hope you are growing in your ability to motivate people. And if you want to learn more, start studying stand-up comedians, okay? Start studying. There's so many resources out. How can I be more motivating? Even pay attention to what motivates me. Love this, okay? Have you ever thought about what it was like to be Jesus with his disciples? Now, they were not stuck in desks like this, all right? But it is comical to think about just what he was up against. Now, he didn't leave them sitting in desks. He took them walking with him all over. And I would encourage you, my kids knew we were having field trips 2 or 3 times a week. They, what? Yeah, I'd be like, come on, we're going to have a field trip. And they're like, where are we going? I'm like, you're going to have to come. And we'd walk over to stock the soda machine or something. They're like, Miss Fulkerson, this is not a field trip. I'm like, Ms. too. And we'd roll change and take it to the bank. And we'd all sorts of things. Now, when I really did get to a field trip, let me tell you, it was motivating. A little bit crazy. I made sure I had plenty of help, but I would take kids spelunking in caves, like the real deal kind, okay? Pepper Sauce Canyon, where you have to put your hands through first and have somebody pull your hands so you get through the rabbit hole. And you're about in that much wet mud while you go through, and we would end up coated head to toe, The leader always thought it'd be funny to click off the lights, and I'd have every kid in my class clinging on to me poof. I'm like, what just happened there? Okay, lights back on. They were terrified. We did some life and death stuff on those field trips, and they remember it to this day, 20, 30 years later. And the reason I did that is because the textbook I was handed to teach science from was horrible. Every other word was bold. So what's important? It's all important. So none of it's important, okay? I couldn't read it. It was such a boring text. I'm not going to foist it off on them. So we didn't have teacher pay teacher back in the day. We had to go to a teacher store. And you know what teacher stores had a lot of? They had tremendous resources for these people over here. But I was teaching here and here. So what am I going to do? I'm going to buy color pages. Color pages. We did color pages in 5th and 6th grade science. They're like, this is fun. We're coloring fish this week. Okay. And the one thing I did make sure content-wise we got across, my mastery thing that year, was all the planets in order, right? The My Very Mother pizza thing that I don't remember right now. Okay, so, and isn't it funny we don't even have pizza anymore, okay? Like Pluto's gone. So the thing I had to master, but boy, did we have some science field trips. Okay, I actually took them into Mexico. Wouldn't do that today. Okay, I was teaching in Arizona. We went down to Nogales, walked across the border. Can you even imagine? We would not do that today. So, crazy overnight campouts, hiking, that sort of stuff that they will never forget. Was it work? Yes. But it's those experiences of doing. It's get them out of the desks and into the world. And it's interesting. I had a young man come back who had been in my science class in 6th grade, and he came back when he was in high school, and he's like, Ms. Wilkinson, I got to tell you, I went to NASA camp this summer. I'm like, NASA camp? I'm not surprised. He was a brainiac. I'm like, I didn't even know there was a NASA camp, and you're going. He's probably on the moon today. But anyways, he's like, Ms. Wilkinson, I just want to thank you because you taught me everything I knew in science. And I'm like, I'm real straight-faced. Oh, I'm so glad you like science. I hardly taught him a thing, but the exposure he got made him curious enough to keep studying on his own. So even though I wasn't the best content, it was highly motivational in the exposure side. So just an idea. I was talking to a very experienced, brilliant music teacher the other day. And we were talking about these ideas, as I hope you talk to one another over dinner tonight about how to motivate kids, what's really involved. And she said, Esther, really comes down to 2 things, 2 words. I was like, yeah, give me those words. She said, you've got to observe. You as a teacher have to observe what gets them excited. You got to get to know your kids because you're actually watching them. You find out what they like. It's so fun to write spelling, to give a spelling test where you're using their names in with the spelling words, making up sentences about topics that they care about. And this works all ages. I'm working with a 15-year-old now, and I describe someone driving his truck or someone, it's just, like they just eat it up, okay? So I've got to observe, and I've got to have curiosity. I'm observing to find out what they are curious about, but I've got to be curious. And I would submit those are 2 key words going forward from this conference to just kind of like hold in you, okay? I've got to observe what's going on here. And then how do I be curious? Picture above your kid's head a big question mark, okay? But that question mark is no judgment. Curious without judgment. We even need to be that way for ourselves. When we're feeling very unmotivated, like we would rather Netflix than grade papers, okay? What's going on? What has demotivated me? What's happening? But without judgment. The defeated enemy wants us to beat ourselves up. And we've got to learn to be able to be curious without judgment. Crucial skill. Now, this little guy has little arm floaties on. What's holding him up? Those little air in the floaties, okay? As someone who taught preschool swimming for a lot of years, I don't advocate these. This is what was alluded to at the beginning of the conference when we talk about surface learning. If we only let kids memorize and regurgitate their way through, they have something fake that's holding them up. But if this little guy ends up in the big ocean with those little floaties, what's going to happen? He's going down. Surface learning may motivate some kids and may even impress their parents. But if they aren't getting deep understanding, they are not ready for the world out there that doesn't ask multiple choice questions. Okay, the big waves of life we have to problem solve. So when it comes to motivating in these content learning subjects, one of the things that every single subject, math, Bible, history, science, one of the things all of those have in common is vocabulary. Yes? Would we all agree that? There's certain words you've got to know. Greatest common factor, you got to know, like all these different terminology. So the last thing we're going to do today is a vocabulary assignment based on spelling, ironically enough, okay? This is where I need to learn. So here's the thing. Even though what we're doing today may apply, you don't teach spelling words per se, use this to apply to the vocabulary you do teach, okay? So here's a story for you. When I was writing Camp Sierra Secret, a friend of mine at lunch one day, she'd been trying to edit it for me before I handed in each chapter to a novel writing class I was taking. And she pulled out a napkin one day in the lunchroom. She's like, Esther, let me draw you a picture. And on the napkin, she drew that. She said, Esther, do you know what French doors are? You know, there's two little doorknobs right there. Esther, the word is D-O-O-R, not D-O-R-E. Would you quit spelling it D-O-R-E? Apparently, I use the word door a lot in the first chapter of my book, okay? And I would spell it D-O-R-E, and I'd get a red wavy line, and I'd click on it, and spell check had no idea what word I wanted. More, M-O-R-E, door, D-O-R-E. This makes sense to me. It doesn't make sense to the English language, okay? Now, here's the thing. When she showed me that visual, I never struggled with the word door again. That was an incredibly good visual because it even married the meaning of the word to the visual. Ooh, better yet, okay? I tell you, your spelling book has its place, especially as a handwriting book to practice on top of words. But you get a little art book that they're drawing the pictures of the words they miss, and they end up with an art book of pictures that help them learn the words. That visual worked because we oftentimes think we're stupid because of the way the English language is. But in truth, one little sound in English can be spelled all those different ways. Dear, pierce, dear, here, peer, fierce, here, sphere. Every single one of those words is spelled a different way. Okay, English is a hot mess, but it's what we've got to work with. So it's very important when we're teaching vocabulary to kids, whether it's vocabulary from any subject or whether it's spelling words, that we use all doors. So I want to explain how to do that, and then the last thing we're going to do today is in your groups, you are going to practice doing the very thing I'm showing you. So you better listen carefully because you're going to do it, okay? So, first of all, things that we see. The example I gave you with door is things that we see. Here's another way to do door. If you even put the double letters that are side by side, you put them in a different color, that makes them stand out. That is especially helpful. You know, before there was a term dyslexia, do you know what they called us? They called dyslexia word blindness because we couldn't see inside the word. Some of us are more forest people, some are more tree people. Most dyslexics are forest people. We see the big patterns. We don't see the specifics unless you train our eyes. And in English, what influences the sound of the vowel is what comes after it, which is why word family phonics is so important. If I can learn bat, hat, cat, rat, I'm learning things that are spelled the same based on the vowel and what comes after it. So another thing you can do with visual is to trace around, and I see where the ascenders are. This word does not have any descenders. That idea of boxing it helps me know that a word like exactly is not spelled E-G-Z, okay, because that just doesn't look right to the shape I'm used to. So boxing is another one. When I was working with a student who was really struggling with the word school, she came up with a visual of when you're in school, you're supposed to keep your eyes on the teacher. So she made the O-O with the eyeballs so she could see the teacher. Of course, the next spelling test, she missed the ACH part, but we got there. Now, this is a good visual that helps you understand the meaning. T-H-E-R-E is over there. T-H-E-I-R has to do with people. It's their car. All of those were visual. You're getting the idea of visual ways to learn words. Let's move to auditory. Any of you know this word? How did you learn this word? M-I-S-S-I-S-I. Like there's this little rhythm that starts going along. And some of you learned to do crooked letter, like you learned all of this stuff, okay? No, I'm not going to do any more than that. Some of you learned B-I-N-G-O, B-I-N-G-O, B. Again, irritating tunes. They're wonderful, okay? Anybody know baloney? How do you know how to spell baloney? Because there's a guy in the town I currently live in named Bobby Jones, not related to the golfer or the person who started university, and he wrote this little jingle, my baloney has the first name. And therefore, we all know how to spell baloney, okay? You can come up with these things. Sometimes it's not a song, it's just the way you pronounce it, okay? Conscience, most of you know what conscience is. I remember the spelling, I don't remember the word. Okay, and then there's things that you participate. Remember do. Right now, how do you participate in a word? Let me show you. So we're going to spell this out loud together. And when you see that little blank, you're going to stand up. Ready? T-H-E-I-R. Why did you stand up on the letter I? That's the one that has to do with people. This time, I want you to go T-H-E-R-E and do the best imitation of a junior hire trying to hit his neighbor. Ready? T-H-E-R-E. Okay, so that's over there. You do those actions enough times, and it's gonna encode, okay? Any of you work as cheerleaders when you were younger? Say, Esther, are you really advocating that in class and spelling we should be going like, yes. Now here's the beautiful thing. What I've done for you today, I would do for the kids, and I call it Word Clinic. And I would teach them how to do this. And then I would make them come in partners, not alone, and teach their word to the class. And then we would analyze it. Was there something visual there? Was there something participation? Was it a jingle we could hear? And you can combine these. It's always better when we combine. Now, sometimes they would go, my word is ant, A-N-T. And so we're going to teach it by going A-N-T, A-N-T, ant. I'm like, okay, class, so did that work for you or did that not work for you? That really wasn't that visual. That wasn't. And I let kids, when their peers are helping them understand, we're not going to be mean about it, but we're going to say that didn't really work for me to learn ant. One other thing I did with this, after I taught them how to learn words, then the whole rest of the year when it was spelling book time, I could say, on the floor with your partner, teach each other these words. And they'd come up with their own strategies in partners. Now, their actual test score, I charted just for them. Okay, their grade was just based on their work. But I had a chart up in the room, and I put them and their partner scores together. And their little race car wasn't going to move any farther ahead until their partner missed 0, okay? So suddenly they were very, there's some kids that are just born knowing how to spell every word there is. You throw at them, it's a gene, okay? They just know how to spell. And they could care less when you hand back papers, and they know they're going to miss 0. But I watched those same kids just looking back at their partner, and when their partner missed 0, they'd be like, yeah, okay? That's what we want to see. We want to see kids taking what they know and not saying, 1 more gold star, please. Can I have my name on the dean's list? Can everybody be impressed with me? That's about as ungodly an attitude as there can possibly be. And our Christian schools have been breeding that for way too long. If you're good at something, thank God, because what do we have that we have not received? And what have we been given but to turn around and give it to somebody else? There's a lot of kids that were good at spelling, but they weren't good at teaching spelling until they were taught how to do it. And then when you miss a word, You have this cool art book where you come up with these things together and you draw. Boat and road have similar vowel patterns, then draw a boat going down a road, okay? Write it on the boat, write it on the road. Like, make this something. Then they walk away with this cool book that they can show people of the words that they struggle with the most. So I think we should sing our song one more time, and then I'll give you a quick participation thing we'll do today, and then we'll be done. So let's sing. What will they hear, hear, hear? What will they see, see, see? What will they do, do, do? Right now. Participation with your partner. I want you, with someone around you, to take a look at these words that are same. These are the hardest ones, okay? Because spell check doesn't catch it, all right? You spelled a correct word and you're still wrong. It's not fair, okay? So I want you to take the person next to you, grab one of these pairs or triples that look interesting to you, and come up with what you think would be a visual strategy, an auditory strategy, or a participation thing you could do. On your mark, get set, go. The person near you, everybody get going. How's it going? How many of you are coming up with something? You're scared to death I'm going to make you come up front, aren't you? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let me have you look up here. Tempting as it is to make you come up here and demonstrate in teams how to do that, I'm not going to do that to you right now. It'd be fun, though. Okay, so here's the thing. Can you see how you could use some of these ideas with the vocabulary you teach? Can you see how actually teaching kids how to learn a word is different than saying, I assigned it on Monday, they failed the test on Friday, dumb kids. We've got to actually teach them, not just assign and test. Assign and test is surface learning. Well, they're in 12th grade. They should know how. Get over it. They don't know how. We've got to teach them how. And while we can be very bitter at their parents and very bitter at all the teachers that should have taught them before they got to us, I submit it would be far better to just accept reality. Jesus took disciples, some were up here, some were down here, some were anti his cause. And he loved them, and he connected with them, and he worked with the hand he was dealt, these guys. We've got to work with what's in front of us, but we've got to realize we don't do it alone. God put kids in that class that can help other kids in that class. One of the reasons I used one of my favorite practices was teams. When I was trying to teach 5th grade and 6th grade needed to do something, they would all be watching me teach 5th grade. And I'm like, no, do your work. Well, they're not going to sit and stare at a piece of paper when there's something entertaining going on, okay? So I would say, you guys sit on the floor in partners and read each other the chapter or do the spelling or whatever. And they stayed on task. Oh, Esther, your class was always perfect? No, 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 no. Okay. If they couldn't handle it on the floor, they came up to eye level where I could keep my eye on them better. Some kids wanted to misbehave to get out of partners because they thought school was all about jam through your work and be done and then go do something else you want to do. And I was like, nope, you actually need partners more than anybody. But what happened then, if there was a third line of defense, if they really weren't staying on task in partners, I had things ready for them. You know, they could copy the dictionary by hand or, you know, little things like that. No, I'm kidding. No. I don't want kids to hate words, so I didn't do that. But there are things you can do, and again, you know what privileges to take away if you've watched them and observed them and know what they care about. But honestly, once they loved teaching each other visual, auditory, like coming up with a rap for the words and coming up with the color coding and especially getting it to where the other person could really master it. It got to where they really enjoyed teaching one another. And some of your poorest spellers can come up with the best ideas for these things because we're often very creative. We're used to taking those back ways and scenic byways where we see all the coffee shops and take a while to get there. But we're getting that, bring that creativity to bear too. Now, I use teams for reading, back and forth in partners. For writing tests, we talk about that. For reviewing, sometimes the chapters you can't quite get to or the ones you're just doing exposure, you can assign one group to teach that, one group to teach that. Obviously, they're going to get to know the chapter they teach better than the ones they just hear presented on, but those are good ways. Partners are good for brainstorming. It's hard to brainstorm alone. Partners are good for discussion. You guys did a lot better job answering me because you'd already shared with someone beside you. That was strategic. I got you talking so you would talk to me. Teach the skill of how learning works. That's what kids need to know. I talked about charting progress together. Now, you guys have heard a lot of practices from me, but you all have lots of practices that you've been using as teachers that you know work. Things that, notice I keep using the word practices. Practices form us. You know how many kids get formed in school? They get formed by the idea of, I don't know how to do this, I'm overwhelmed. I wait until the last possible moment and I pull an all-nighter, and that's what learning is. And you know, that's forming them. And if we want them to be formed a different way, we're going to have to intervene and show them how to break it down into smaller bites and accomplish it along the way. And not make these mammoth assignments that have a deadline out there in the future. We have to hold their hand and help them through it. Esther, someday they're going to not have someone to hold their hand. Right. Let's make sure they can read before that day comes, okay? Let's give them the basics while we're still there to hold their hand. I want you to think about some of your favorite practices. What works for you in helping teach kids? And I want you to keep right on sharing those with one another as you go out into your afternoon. Yes, we're ending early today because you got things to think on. And remember that paper I gave you this morning with all those little boxes? I actually want you to not only fill it out prayerfully, think through at least one per area, but I would love it if you would be willing to find somebody at your school or you'll stay in contact with and share with another person what you did on that sheet. What you're thinking, I think I need a bedtime of like 9 o'clock. I think I'm going to try that. Won't mean you'll do it perfectly, but you can start a practice. So we've given you lots to think about, and I hope lots to discuss even as you go on into your afternoon and dinner tonight. Especially think through how teams, how partners, how what we see here do affects what you're teaching the next day you walk in your classroom. Because if you don't start implementing something like this right away, all your wiring, you have habits around how you always do things. So you're going to have to get a hold of an idea that you're like, ooh, okay, so the next thing's up fractions. What am I going to do? Next thing up is the universe, like atmosphere, all of that. What am I going to do? You've got to think through how you're going to apply this. And I can almost guarantee the first time you do it, it won't go well, okay? It won't go well. And you're going to be like, that lady, she was crazy town, okay? She was just crazy town. And we're not doing that. You're going to sit at your desk and you're going to write it 10 times. That's what you're going to do. By the way, they had me do that a lot with spelling. I'd always misspell it the first time and copy it, wrong 10 more times. Thanks, that helped. How about rainbow writing, where you write it out for them in beautiful handwriting and have them write right on top of what you wrote? And rainbow means then they get a blue pen, then they get a green pen, then they get, you're like, Esther, isn't it going to be black at the end? Yeah, it is. But at least they will have spelled it right, okay? That's rainbow writing. So think through what some of your practices are. Some of the best tips you take away from this week may be what you're hearing from the people around you. I was so relieved coming into this conference knowing I didn't have to bring all the good ideas, because look at y'all. You've got so much to share. So please freely share with one another. I want to remind you about that little computer back there, that if you want to give me your contact information, I'll send you notes from the session. I'll put you on the list for Learning Lifeguard Lifeline newsletter. Any other questions? I'm going to head back there. Feel free to ask me. Have a glorious afternoon. Get lots of rest tonight. And we'll see you back here tomorrow. Don't forget, if you have questions, if you can leave them for me tonight, I'll take them tomorrow. Just preference will go to the ones that I have today. So thank you all. Lord bless.